Hope you're having a great day. Welcome to Coast View, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, if you missed my show yesterday with Jeannie Lucky, I want to really encourage you to go take a listen to it. It sort of speaks for itself, but it's a show that talks about adversity, overcoming the odds, about perseverance. I think it's hers is an incredible story about accepting reality as it is and just making the best of it. And not, in her case, not just making the best of it, but being a fundamentally important community leader in so many different ways. It's truly an inspiring story. So if you missed my conversation with Jeannie Lucky, go take a look at it. You can go to the Ricky Matthews /Coast View Facebook page. You can go to the SuperTalk Mississippi Facebook page or the SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast Facebook page or your favorite podcast to take a listen to it. Incidentally, I was looking this morning at some of the numbers on Coast View. And you get, because of Facebook, you get a lot of statistics, and it was really humbling to see how many people are engaging in the show these days. Really, really incredible. In fact, next week I might share some of the numbers with you as we start to get some new numbers in. So it's fundamentally incredible, the number of people who are engaging with the show. So I really appreciate it. And it's a sign that we're making an impact, that people like the approach that we're taking. And I really appreciate you listening on 103.1 or however you choose to listen. Hey, I want to share something with you before we go to the show. By the way, we've got a great show today. I found this wonderful piece about overthinkers on Motivation, the Fuel. It's called Motivation, the Fuel. It's just a site. And it said the 10 facts about overthinkers. And, I'm a bit of an overthinker. A lot of people listening to this show might be overthinkers. And if you're not, people who are. But I just thought it was pretty powerful. And here's what it said. Number one, when they're sorry, they're really sorry and hope you accept their apology. Number two, they can't sleep at night if they make the wrong choice. It doesn't matter the choice. Every choice is important to them. Number three, they're not insecure control freaks. They just think a lot. Number four, they can't let anything go because if they understand it better, they can change the outcome. I like that one. Number five, they have high expectations. They're very hard on themselves and they expect a lot from others. Number six, they're indecisive, but once they decide, you cannot change their mind. Boy, that's definitely true. Number seven, it's really difficult for them to live in the moment. They always worry about what's going to happen next. Number eight, they always try to be on time and prepare, and usually have more than one alarm clock set. I've heard that before. Number nine, overthinking doesn't make them crazy. They just think more than the average person. And then lastly, and I think just probably the most important, they know relationships can be challenging as they put added meaning behind anything that is said to them. Okay. And then at the end of the day, this is, I think, really important. But once they love you, they will always love you. Now, they're very committed people. I think that's terrific. If you're an overthinker, you probably related well to that. If you know an overthinker, it might give you some insight to how that person thinks. Okay, so now let's shift gears. I'm delighted, actually, today to have a district attorney, Crosby Parker, joining me today. He's responsible for cases in Harrison, Hancock, and Stone County. And I've been looking forward. I've been trying to get our calendars in sync for quite a while now. And I'm just looking forward to this conversation today. So anyway, without any further ado, Crosby, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing outstanding. Very excited to be on this morning.
Hey, listen, we saw each other. Now, look, we have a mutual acquaintance. My brother-in-law, Peter Bohanovich, has been saying to me for quite a long time, why haven't I had you on my show yet? And I told him that we've been working to try to make that happen. But he thinks the world of you, and your family. And I finally got a chance to meet you at the One Coast Awards, and it was a pleasure to finally get to meet you in that scenario. But the fact that you're close to Peter, I will not hold that against you.
I'm also friends with Alan too, so that kind of rises me up, right?
Both great guys, as you well know. You know, the family is very close, and you know, they're both brother-in-laws, but they might as well be brothers to me because that's how close we are. Hey, listen, we saw each other at the One Coast Award, and you were actually presented this year with the One Coast Award. I'm privileged to have been the person and our company, the Sun Herald, starting the One Coast Award. I think it was our 20-year anniversary for the awards. Along the way, the Sun Herald sort of handed that off to the chambers. The chambers collaborate around it now under the mantle One Coast Awards. But when I was doing it, Crosby, it was really important to me to say to people when I told them that they were winning an award this year, congratulations, enjoy the attention that you're going to get. But I really want you to focus on this, that we're going to be holding you up as an example for others. And hopefully others will be inspired by the example that you're setting to in your case, to be in public life, to give back to the community, to have had a great career in the Air Force and National Guards. We're going to talk about all that here in just a second. But, to make that big decision to get into politics, which I know it's hard. It's hard, especially hard these days, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is in just a second. But you were recognizing all these things, and I think you're the kind of guy that we had in mind when we started the awards, to show people what they need to do in order to contribute to the community. But you understand that responsibility, don't you?
Absolutely. When I found out that I was going to receive the award, it was very humbling. Because when you look back over the 20 years and you see the people that have been recognized, those are big shoes to fill. And what I told a couple of them when they came and congratulated me, I said, look, y'all built the plow and you've been pulling it. I just want to help out. And it just was really wonderful because, once again, you know better than anybody, we sometimes focus on the negative. That gets a lot of the clicks. But to celebrate the men and women who are actually out there on our coast making a difference, that's exciting to me. And to be part of that group, it really energized me to know, okay, we may be able to do something here, and to help collaborate with some of the men and women up there. I shared the stage with Leonard Papania. This is somebody that I've worked with, over the last decade at the DA's office. And now we're trying to take that relationship and expand it into different mentoring programs and things like that. So suffice it to say, it really did fire me up to be part of that group and to just be with all the other men and women who have been recognized.
Yeah, it was a great group this year. And, one of the things, and we're going to take a step back in just a second and get back to sort of where you grew up and all of that. But while we're on this theme, it's interesting to be in the DA's role because you get to see challenges that a community has. Let's put it that way. So in so many different ways. The challenges could be crime, it could be child abuse, it could be white collar crime, it could be so many different things. And what it gives you an opportunity to see from where you're sitting is the importance of mentoring programs. For example, the Boys and Girls Club. We'll come back to that in a second. While the Child Advocacy Center is so important, the Gulf Coast Center for Nonviolence, CASA. We could go into a lot of detail about all these things, but what I often say on the show, and I go back to the first President Bush when he talked about the 1,000 points of light. After Katrina here in coastal Mississippi, we got an incredible education about what it takes after you've been hit by the worst natural disaster in American history, and long since Katrina, what it takes to keep a community like ours ticking is massive collaboration between volunteers of all stripes working in so many different ways with offices like yours, for example, to help this community stay as whole as it possibly can. And it takes a lot to make that work, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you recognize, as a district attorney, we handle individuals who have been victimized by crime. And there's nothing that we can do to ever take that away from them. We try to help walk them through the process, hold the wrongdoer accountable, but also help in that healing process. And it can sometimes get you down. But what is so positive in my role is I also get to see a lot of heroes. I get to see a lot of people who can bounce back And I get to see a lot of different groups that you just mentioned, CASA, the Child Advocacy Center, the Boys and Girls Club, that are working with these individuals. And I'll tell you, that's what, look, first and foremost, we're going to hold a wrongdoer accountable. But we also need to, once again, work with one another so that we can help the victims go forward and bounce back.
Well, when we come back, we have Crosby Parker is the DA for Harrison, Hancock, and hang on just a second. For whatever reason, my thing froze up in Stone counties. I knew that, but I was looking up and my screen went blank. But anyway, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation. We're going to start from the beginning. Where did he grow up? And where did he go to school? Where did his commitment to the military come from? We'll talk. It's extensive, actually. We'll get into all that here when we come back. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast View. We have Crosby Parker, the DA for the Second Circuit Court District, for Hancock, Harrison, and Stone counties. And boy, he has his hands full. We will get to that. We will get to that shortly. As I mentioned before we went to the break, Crosby has just an incredible story about his commitment to the military. And we'll get into where that all came from here now. But why don't we start with this? Where did you grow up, Crosby?
Well, that's an interesting question. I was actually born in Canton, Mississippi. I've got two brothers and a sister. We're all a year and a half apart. My dad started working for the Attorney General's office, but in elementary school, my grandparents had a railroad construction business up in Southern Illinois. So I actually went to high school up in Southern Illinois, but my dad was a baseball player for Mississippi State. I was the number 2 son, and he said, "You're going to Mississippi State." So that brought me back to the state of Mississippi, where I took an Air Force ROTC scholarship. And I met my beautiful wife at Mississippi State, who was born and raised in Gulfport, Mississippi. And I can tell you this is a good story, is in 97, I got invited by some friends to come down to the coast for Mardi Gras. And I went to Cavaliers, and it was one of my first dates with my future wife. And at that time, I fell in love with her, and I fell in love with the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So
wow.
It's pretty interesting how that happened.
So you went to state. What was your undergraduate degree in?
I was an accounting major, and I had a pilot slot because my brother was a Navy pilot. But I found out that was a 10-year commitment, and he said, "You may not want to go that route." So I ended up taking the law school entrance exam, did well, and the Air Force allowed me to go to law school before serving my active duty time.
Well, it's interesting, because I've known, I have my background is business, obviously, and had a lot of accounting in the MBA program and so on. But accounting is a good one to have, actually, when you're a lawyer and when you're in your role. It helps you sort of understand how it all works. It
really was, because when you deal with white collar, embezzlement, things of that nature, it can get very complicated. And because of my undergrad degree, when I first started at the DA's office, Kono Karana and then Joel Smith kept giving me some of those high-profile corruption cases because of my accounting degree. So, and then now in my role as the DA, as you know, dealing with budgets and dealing with employees and dealing with 3 different counties and state funds and county funds, it's been a very helpful background to have.
And it helps to develop sort of an attention to detail. Did you always have that in your, if you go back in your life?
My parents said that I was very early on a list maker, and that I would set the alarm and that I would get up early. And you were mentioning an overthinker at the very beginning. I think you were describing me. I do have 2 alarms. And, but no, in the military, that's one of the things too that they really focus on. I remember in boot camp, they said attention to detail. If I can't trust you with the small things, how can I trust you with the big things? And that's something that I've really carried with me.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see the impact that, these steps of your life and how they influence you and start to build the foundation for, in some cases, serendipity. You don't know. Like that was a serendipitous moment. when you made that decision not to go to the accounting route once you left Mississippi State and to go to law school. And each step kind of builds on the other, and you have so many different steps that you went through that led you to this position. But all these experiences that you got, I mean, the opportunity to serve in active duty. Where did that take you when you did that?
And it was incredible. As a brand new lawyer to go on active duty, my first duty assignment was in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So I was newly married. My wife and I, they sent us to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I started off, which they gave me unbelievable opportunities, not only to be in the courtroom, but to do environmental law, do contract law, to do claims adjusting. And it just showed me, but then it also showed me what I enjoyed doing. And I just immediately gravitated toward the courtroom. And so my next assignment, they sent me to Europe.
Yeah. Well, so tell me about that.
Well, so once again, my wife and I packed up. We went over. We were stationed in England for 2.5 years. And when I was in England, I became a defense counsel. So instead of prosecuting, I defended airmen in England, Germany, and Italy. And I would travel that circuit for 2.5 years. And I tell people all the time, to be good at prosecuting cases, go be a defense counsel. It really does teach you the ins and outs of both sides of that equation, which I think is very important.
Well, what's interesting about that, you were learning that, obviously the defense side of things for sure, but to learn it while being in Europe and seeing the diversity of Europe and the difference in the way the governments operate and what my old friend Reed Geist told me, he went there on honeymoon many years ago, and he said, the thing I remember most about Europe is that everything is old. That's the way he talks about it. But it's true, man. I mean, when you go to, Ann and I were in Croatia a couple of years ago, and God, it's so beautiful. Everything is it's so different. It's so beautiful, but you gain a perspective, don't you, from being overseas and sort of seeing it from through other people's eyes.
It really was, especially I was probably 28 years old. And there were times when some of my clients will have gotten in trouble down in the city. So either Cambridge or London, and I'd have to go down there and meet with their barristers and their prosecutors. Well, before we'd have a meeting, they would roll in a tea cart and everybody would get their cup of tea before you'd have this meeting, where in America, we get right to business. We're on a strict schedule. But they would want to have this sit-down discussion about one another before we would get into the meat of the case. It was very interesting for a young man to be able to see that.
Yeah, I had a conversation recently with Craig Ray from Visit Mississippi, who worked for both Bushes along the way, and one of the really important visits that he was responsible for was the first time that George W. Bush met with the Queen. And in the conversation, talked about all the formalities, all these incredible formalities. But you're right. I mean, certainly at the royal stage, there's a lot of them, but it does sort of kind of, trickle down into their culture. And it's good to know those things, though, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it's good, as you know, when you go into environments that you're not completely familiar with, it helps you to learn to adapt. And one of the things you said, to come up to a leadership level, you have to go through so many steps that prepare you for that. And each one of them, I had a general tell me when I was just a captain, look, saw the log in front of you, do the best job you can, and then build on each of those experiences. And that's such good information.
I love the way he said that. Saw the log in front of you. And I quote John Hairston all the time, who said on my show that, you don't just choose to go be president of the chamber or United Way or whatever it might be. You have to do your reps. You have to flex muscles and learn the way it works and work your way up. The same thing true inside an organization. You don't just become the CEO of the company, for goodness sakes. You got to do your reps and hope that you can, rise to that level eventually. But I saw the log in front of you and do the best you can. That's really good advice.
Well, and I'll tell you, as a JAG in the military, what was so interesting is that I had the opportunity to advise so many different commanders, from lieutenant colonels to generals. And I got to see the way that they made decisions. And that was such a great learning experience that you don't realize you're getting it when you're in the heat of the moment. But
Yeah.
later on, when you have the opportunity, you draw on that. You draw on watching other people, like you said, do those reps, and you learn watching them. And that was such a great experience for a young lawyer, and also for somebody who eventually had leadership aspirations.
So you did 6 years of active duty and then 14 years with the Mississippi Air National Guard. I mean, you did your reps.
And I'll tell you, that was so when we left active duty, because we were going to start having our family, there was only one place we were moving. And we came immediately down to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But my wife and I loved our military service, and we wanted to continue to be able to do that. And the Mississippi Air National Guard gave us that opportunity. And I'm still, this will be my 20th year in service. I'm currently the Colonel, State Staff Judge Advocate for the National Guard of Mississippi. So both the Army and the Air. There's about 12,500 members that we help provide legal services to.
That's incredible, Crosby, that you've sort of rose to that level, and while simultaneously, I might add, making the decision to get into public life in the way that you did. When we come back, we'll talk specifically about that decision. What led him to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run for elected office. And then we're going to talk about the DA's office. What's it all about? Man, it is. You got to be a jack of all trades to be DA. And we'll explain why here in just a second. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast View. I'm having a terrific conversation with my friend Crosby Parker, who is a DA here in coastal Mississippi. He has a tremendous amount of responsibility, and I referred to this as we went to the break as to be a DA these days, you have to be sort of a jack of all trades, and I would say that describes the DA's office. They have so much they have to be responsible for, and we're going to get into that in a second. But where his area of responsibility is Harrison, Hancock, and Stone counties. And we'll start to kind of break up the framework here in just a second for what he's responsible for. But Crosby, when did you decide that public life was for you and that you were going to run for an elected position?
Well, I'll tell you this, when I came to work at the DA's office, once again, it's one of those things that you don't realize the effect it's going to have on you. But coming out of the Air Force, my wife and I not only wanted to move to the Gulf Coast, but we wanted to be part of the community. And being at the DA's office put me in contact with so many people. And I got to try so many cases, and I got to talk to so many families of victims. And the DA's office is incredible. There's so many good men and women. We're talking 30 people. So whenever the opportunity came that Joel Smith was going to go be the Court of Appeals judge, that's when I went home and I talked to my wife and I said, look, I care about this DA's office. I care about what it does on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And I know that this is not going to always be fun whenever you're out front. But she said, there's only one thing that we can do. Let's do it. And whenever I've gone forward with it, it really has been special. But once again, it's special because of what we do and the men and women in this office. And so that makes me want to step up and fulfill the role that I feel like I'm ready for and that I've been ready for with my military experience and my prosecutor experience.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's kind of frame it all up for people who don't really understand what the DA's office is all about. Why don't we just start with the mission of the DA? I mean, essentially, if you were in an elevator with someone and had one floor to tell them what the DA's office was all about, what would you say to them?
Absolutely. So the district attorney for Harrison, Hancock, and Stone County, they handle all felony prosecutions in those 3 counties. And when I say a felony prosecution, it could be as simple as a possession of a drug all the way up to a capital murder. We don't handle any traffic tickets. We don't handle any misdemeanors, but all felony prosecutions go through the district attorney's office.
So right off the bat, I can say that you're in a really, really important position to understand where the challenges in society are. And we'll get to in a second that there's always redemption. At least usually there is some possibilities for redemption. There are always victims, and so their organizations are going to be aligned around them. But when you look at the work that you guys are doing, you know, like I know that it really covers the spectrum in terms of crimes. But what are the crimes these days that give you the most heartburn?
Oh, it's you know, obviously whenever you deal with crimes against children, and then what we're seeing an increase in is juvenile violence. I mean, when you're talking about that, that's got to be the most concerning, because that's where the uptick is.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as district attorney, one of the things I constantly am looking at is trends throughout the United States. I want to know if something's coming our way, how do we get prepared for it, or what can we do to possibly mitigate it or stop it? And so those will always be 2 of the sets of crimes that really do worry us as far as what can we do to prevent them.
Well, listen, on both points, and I've talked about them often here on the show. The first, as it relates to kids, you know, I don't think any reasonable person who cares about society and kids in particular can stomach some of what you have to deal with. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time on this show talking about human trafficking. And they think about human trafficking, they think about something that's happening in a faraway land, but they don't realize it could be one of your neighbors. Mm-hmm. And what's happening there. I've talked a lot about that. From the Attorney General on down, I've had tremendous conversations about that. But any crime against children has to be a major priority. And it's obviously no acceptable number. There's no acceptable number of crimes against children that are acceptable. But to understand that there's a rise in those types of crimes, it's just incredible. The other is, as it relates to young people involved in crime. When I was in New Orleans, I spent a lot of time understanding the situation in New Orleans, and I spent a lot of time with Mitch Landrieu, the mayor of New Orleans. We became really good friends and talked a lot about how the changing nature of the situation. And what he said often about that, incidentally, was that the kids have become, or the people involved in crimes have gotten younger. Mm-hmm. They have tools now. They have weapons that are much more destructive and much more dangerous. Not that a single gun is not dangerous, but he's just talking about the kind of guns and weapons that are available to them. He says that he's talked to so many of them, and that most of the time they're scared to death. They're just literally trying to survive, but they don't expect to live until tomorrow because of the threatening scenario they have to live with. And that makes them even more dangerous. The fact that they're literally scared for their lives, they've been told to do something and they go do it. Or the other thing is, it's not Bloods and Crips anymore. It's neighborhood gangs, small, dangerous groups that are territorial, and they're fighting amongst themselves in ways that will take generations to fix, and that no one has really come up with a good answer for it yet. And unfortunately, you're seeing that drift into small communities all over America, and we're seeing it here in coastal Mississippi in a big way. Unfortunately, Crosby, it's got to worry you to death.
It does, and you said something about it coming from big cities down to coastal Mississippi, and that's one of the things that I've really kind of started trying to partner with other nonprofits on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, is because our young kids aren't being mentored by people from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. They'll go on their phones, they'll go on their internet, and they're being mentored by people throughout the United States that don't have our values. And one of the things that I'm really focused on, my wife works in an elementary school, is focusing on the 8 to 12-year-old age group. And the Boys and Girls Club and has been able to get a grant to really start focusing on that age group, because that's your last real chance to make a difference. Because when a child gets a gun in their hands at 14 or 15, it's proven it's difficult to get them out of their hands without somebody going to jail or somebody being hurt.
It's scary. The more I learned about it, the more I wanted to focus on solutions, but there are no easy solutions. It really is generational. And I think your point about mentoring is really important. A lot of the young men in particular come from households that didn't have working parents, or maybe didn't have parents at all. And it's a very concerning situation, but there are solutions, but it takes a community-wide effort to deal with it. Maybe one day we'll come back and spend more time just talking about those two issues, because they both matter to me. I think they matter to most people a whole lot, especially given the news that we're hearing these days. If you think about the structure of your office, tell me about, how is it sort of divided out, and where are your offices located?
That's a great question. So, as I stated, we handle all the felony cases in the 3 counties. That's between 3,500 and 4,000 different charges every year. So we have offices in each of the major courthouses. So we have an office in Gulfport, we have an office in Biloxi, we have an office in Bay St. Louis and Hancock County, and we have an office up in Wiggins in Stone County. And obviously Gulfport, the courthouse there, that's kind of our mothership. That's where we have most of our employees. But we have 14 different ADAs spread out across those offices, and about another 16 to 17 support staff and investigators, victim coordinators, things of that, to help us process through those cases.
Well, how do you, as a leader, those are huge numbers, and there's no rest for the weary. How do you keep your team motivated to want to continue every single day to come in and make a difference?
We talk about it on a regular basis. This is something that has to be part of our office philosophy, and that's being passionate about what we do. There's no doubt, to want to come in and handle these kind of cases on a day-to-day basis, you have to want to make a difference. And with our office, when you start there, it kind of makes my job a lot easier, because I know they want to. So now I just think about, what do I need to do to ensure they have the resources to do what they need to do. And so,
it takes a lot of dedication. It really does. And you see people who love their work and want to make a difference, and frankly know they can make a difference to what they do, whether it's dealing with victims, or whether it's going into the courtroom and doing what needs to be done to a habitual offender, or what there's any number of examples in all of that. Hey, when we come back, we'll have a final segment with Crosby Parker, the DA for Hancock, Harrison, and Stone counties, and we'll talk a little bit more about why does he stay involved in the community? How do all these dots connect when he's involved in terms of the work that he does? We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast View. I'm really thrilled to have my friend Crosby Parker, the DA for Hancock, Harrison, and Stone County, with us today. And we talked a lot about the structure, some of the kind of cases that they're involved with. We could spend 2 more shows talking about the myriad of cases that they're focused on, and their philosophy. For example, I mean, there's a lot of focus in this office on pretrial diversion, on drug court. We said, there's a real rise in the number of cases that are able to get into the drug court. That's been, I hear so many good things about what the drug court is doing. We'll come back to that in just a minute. And then the issues around house arrest. And you guys are working hard to try to give people opportunities. I mean, I know that there's these habitual offenders for sure, but there's a lot of focus on, I guess the first thing you got to think of is the victim, and where the victim is in any opportunities, at least initially, for a particular person to have redemption sooner than later. In some cases, it's just going to have to come later. But how do you think about that?
Absolutely. We're always going to be a victim first office, and we want to make sure that the victim understands the process and that they have a say in the process. Ultimately, it'll be the district attorney's office final decision, but we're going to work with them throughout. And one of the things that we talk about is the defendant. Is it a child predator or a violent crime or a habitual offender? Because there's no doubt they're going to jail. That's the way that works. But if they're a young first-time offender, there may be an opportunity for rehabilitation. And that's where the pretrial diversion program comes. That's where our intervention drug court comes. And if those individuals can survive those programs, then they won't have a felony on their record, which is huge because, as you know, you get that felony at age 19, it's going to be with you at age 29, 39, 49. And so we take that very seriously. But it's those first-time offenders that are nonviolent crimes that we'll talk to the victims about it, or if it's a drug crime or something like that, we'll see if we can get them help, because that's important.
The thing we talked about at the beginning of the show is that it takes a community to make an office like yours work. And so you've got your team approach, trying to understand how do you give passionate service and what that's all about. You have all these nonprofits that are out there in the community. You mentioned the Girls and Boys Club and the mentoring program that they're engaged with. I mean, listen, there's tremendous evidence that if you can get them young, I think you mentioned, from 8 to 12 is the sort of the target. But if you get to young people at that age group and you impress upon them the things that need to be impressed upon them so that as they get older, they're making the right decision, you can change a kid's life. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming in that regard. But you've got the Center for Nonviolence, which I've had on this show many times, the role that they play in helping to sort of protect women and others. It takes a community, doesn't it? Oh,
you just mentioned some of our strongest partners, whether it's Stacey Riley at the Center for Nonviolence, whether it's the Child Advocacy Center, whether it's CASA. I tell people all the time that because of the work they do, it allows us to be able to focus on prosecution. It allows us to be able to focus on getting ready for trial, to hold the wrongdoer accountable, because we know that our victims are receiving services, they're receiving counseling, they're receiving what they need, the support they need to make it through the criminal justice system, because it's not easy. It's not easy.
So, Crosby, as we start to wind down a bit, when you think about your role in public life, what are you most proud of?
I'm really proud of the team that we have at the DA's office. I mean, any successful office is going to tell you it's about teamwork, and the men and women that we have been able to have. And look, I can't take all the credit for that. Kono Karana did a great job as a district attorney. Joel Smith did a great job as a district attorney. I was lucky enough to be the chief prosecutor for 8 years. And so when I took over, I knew exactly what kind of office we had and what my role would be going forward. So I'm most proud of the people that we have and the mission that we can accomplish.
I like the way, from Kono through Joel to you, when you've got all these cases, I mean, because even though maybe the leadership changes, the grind of the caseload and all the requirements associated with that never stops. So continuity, you just can't come into a role like you have unless it's broken, unless the system is broken. You got to fix it. You just can't come in there and shake it up. You got to. The continuity was really important, wasn't it?
Oh, and you hit it when you said, look, you got to do your reps to be able to focus at the 30,000-foot view of 3,500 to 4,000 cases a year. You better know how to handle one, and that's what kind of happened. And Joel did a good job of bringing me in early and getting to see both sides of not only trying the big cases, but also helping with the leadership. And that's where I think the military really helped me also.
Well, it's great to have the opportunity to visit with you. We'll have you back. I really would love to kind of drill into the issue that we're facing currently. Certainly, any issues around children and what the community can do to help is something I want to talk about. I really want to talk about this violent crime issue that we're having in the community. We just touched on it today, but it's complicated. And it's not good. It's not good. But we're not alone. I mean, it's as we discussed, it's seeping into communities all over America, and there's a lot of reasons for it. And as a set of communities, as a society, we better start to address it, or it's not going to get better. And if it's not getting better, it's probably getting worse. But it's been a pleasure to see your commitment to your work and get a sense of your heart and what that means. And I've really enjoyed it, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Ricky. It's a pleasure. I look forward to coming back on.
You bet. So this has been Crosby Parker, the DA for Harrison, Hancock, and Stone County. And it's been a terrific conversation. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.